I never imagined the day would come when my own family would look at my children as if they didn't belong to us. That afternoon, when I stepped into Heartstone Lodge, the place where my childhood memories still clung to the wooden beams, like soft dust, something in the air felt wrong, cold, stiff, unfamiliar. Usually the lobby smelled of pine and citrus like Christmas mornings and warm fireplaces, but today it smelled like polished marble and tension. My eyes landed on the coffee table where a cream-colored envelope sat neatly centered, as if it had been placed there for display, not for me. The handwriting on the front, Caroline's wedding, felt like a blade dressed in lace. With a strange heaviness settling in my stomach, I opened the envelope. One single card slid out. My name, Olivia Hart, printed cleanly in gold foil. Underneath it, 2 short lines punched the air out of my lungs. Invitation for Olivia Hart admitted. Lucas Hart and Emma Hart not suitable for this ceremony. Not suitable. As if my children, my polite, gentle, bright children, were something that might stain the linens or ruin the photographs. I looked up expecting someone to say it was a mistake, a poorly worded note. Instead, I found my father across the room, leaning back in the leather armchair, with the steady indifference of a man who had already rehearsed his reaction. You have to understand, Olivia, he said. This is a wedding of image. I understood, but not in the way he meant. I understood that this time they had crossed a line I wouldn't forget. I held the invitation card between my fingers, feeling its thick edges cut against my skin. The room was painfully silent except for the faint crackle of a fire I no longer felt welcome near. My father's expression was the same one he used whenever he delivered family decisions, calm, firm, unbothered by the hurt he caused. My mother hovered nearby, hands folded tightly in front of her, her eyes shying away, as if she wished she could disappear into the wallpaper. She glanced once at the card, once at me, and then down at the floor. Not a single word came from her. My breath trembled as I tried to swallow the bitterness rising in my throat. Not suitable, I asked softly. What does that even mean? Caroline entered then, appearing in a sweep of white cashmere and flawless hair, cheeks flushed from whatever pre-wedding chaos she'd been orchestrating. She barely spared me a glance before announcing, I assume you've seen the card. When I didn't answer, she rolled her eyes. Olivia, please don't make that face. You know how your kids are. Lucas talks nonstop and Emma, well, she has trouble staying still. This is a fragile event. A fragile event. As if a 10-year-old's curiosity or a 7-year-old's joy could shatter her cathedral of perfection. Caroline, I said, my voice steady even as my heart cracked, they are children. They're your niece and nephew. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I need everything perfect. You're welcome, of course. But your kids? It's better if you come alone. The words echoed like a slap in the quiet room. My father nodded almost approvingly, as if Caroline had said something wise. My mother turned away slightly, and I caught the shimmer of tears she tried to hide. A part of me reached for her, for the mother I remembered as gentle, warm, present. But the woman before me was afraid of something, and she didn't have the strength to contradict my father or my sister. Better for who, I asked, my voice sharper now. For everyone, Caroline said breezily. Honestly, Olivia, you should be grateful we're being clear. We don't want trouble at the wedding. You understand. I understood something entirely different. I understood that my family had not invited me. They had summoned me to dismiss me. I understood they had reduced my children to inconveniences. I understood they believed I would swallow this humiliation the way I had swallowed every slight, every dismissal, every time they chose Caroline over me. And I understood something else, too, that behind all this polite cruelty lay something deeper. Something they were terrified I might uncover if I stood too close. I set the card gently on the table, though inside I wanted to tear it in two. Where is the picture of grandmother that used to hang by the stairs? I asked suddenly. The empty frame I'd noticed earlier tugged at my mind like a loose thread. My father stiffened. We moved some things. Renovations. But only her picture is missing, I said quietly. Caroline waved dismissively. It didn't fit the theme anymore. My mother flinched at that. A strange sensation washed through me, like a door cracking open inside my memory. I saw my grandmother's soft smile, the way she held my hands like she was passing something delicate to me. The way she once said, "This house remembers Liv." I looked around the lodge, its polished floors, its holiday decorations, its spotless grandeur, and realized for the first time that it had begun to forget. The room grew too warm, too suffocating. I needed air. I needed distance. I needed to protect my children from the rot beneath this place's perfectly varnished surface. Without another word, I slipped the card back into its envelope and tucked it into my bag. My mother took a half step toward me, as if she wanted to speak, but my father's presence froze her in place. Caroline was already checking her phone, her world continuing forward without even a flicker of remorse. "I'll see you at the wedding then," Caroline called lightly, not noticing or not caring that something inside me had shifted irrevocably. I looked at her with a calm she didn't understand, a calm she mistook for surrender. What she didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that silence can be a warning, a gathering of storm clouds. The stillness before the wind changes. I left the lodge without looking back. Outside, the cold air wrapped around me like a truth I had forgotten, that I did not have to accept their cruelty. That my children deserved better than a family that valued image over love. That the life I had built away from this place, small, cozy, humble, was more honest than any mansion filled with secrets. As I walked toward my car, I glanced up at the second-floor window. My mother stood there, half hidden behind the curtain, her hand pressed against the glass. Her face carried a sorrow I hadn't seen since I was a child. She wasn't just sad, I realized. With a jolt, she was afraid. And that fear wasn't about the wedding. It wasn't about my children. It was about something they all had chosen to bury. My breath fogged in the chill air as I opened the car door. My hands shook not from the cold but from clarity. They thought excluding my children would force me back into silence. They had no idea what they had just started. Because in that moment, standing in the winter air, I promised myself one thing: I would not cry. I would not beg. I would not break. I would prepare. When I left Heartstone Lodge that evening, the sky had already turned a deep winter blue, the kind that makes the world feel quiet and a little hollow. I drove home with the invitation card, sitting like a weight in my bag, and my mind replaying every look, every word, every silence from earlier. By the time I unlocked the door of my small townhouse, Lucas and Emma were already running toward me, arms outstretched full of laughter. It struck me then so sharply it almost hurt how fiercely they loved without condition, and how little my family understood that kind of love. I hugged them both, tightly burying my face in their hair, breathing in the safety they gave me. They sensed something was wrong but didn't ask. They never asked. Outside, the cold air wrapped around me like a truth I had forgotten, that I did not have to accept their cruelty. That my children deserved better than a family that valued image over love. That the life I had built away from this place, small, cozy, humble, was more honest than any mansion filled with secrets. As I walked toward my car, I glanced up at the second-floor window. My mother stood there, half hidden behind the curtain, her hand pressed against the glass. And somewhere between stirring the soup and slicing apples, I realized how absurd my family's claim had been, calling these two not suitable for anything. Still, the words clung to me like frost. After dinner, while the kids colored at the coffee table, I stepped into the hallway to breathe. My phone buzzed. A message from my cousin Marianne. "We're supposed to say you're traveling for work. Your parents insist." Sorry. My fingers tightened around the phone. They weren't just excluding my kids, they were rewriting the story entirely, erasing me to avoid questions, shaping an image that didn't include my existence. I put the phone down before the rage inside me could spill out in front of my children. Later that night, after bedtime routines and extra-long hugs, I found myself staring at the ceiling in the dark, replaying my father's tone. My mother's silence, the way Caroline brushed off my children like an afterthought. I couldn't sleep. My heart wouldn't let me. I sat at the dining table, the only light coming from the soft glow of a small lamp. The envelope was still in my bag. I pulled it out just to look at the card again, as if somehow the words would change. They didn't. Not suitable. My jaw clenched, my eyes burned. But beneath the ache, another feeling was growing, a quiet, simmering suspicion I had ignored for years. Why had they been so determined to keep me away? Why did my father seem more annoyed than remorseful when I questioned him? Why did my mother shake like she was keeping someone else's secret? It wasn't about my children. They were protecting something. Or hiding something. I pushed the card aside when I heard soft footsteps behind me. Lucas stood there with his blanket draped over one shoulder, sleepy-eyed. "Mom," he whispered. "Why did Grandpa say you might take your share?" My heart froze. I pulled out a chair for him. "When did you hear that?" "At the lodge," he mumbled. He said it to someone. I don't know what it means, but I did. Inheritance, will, family business. Words I never cared about growing up because I believed my family would treat me fairly. That belief suddenly felt naive. I kissed the top of Lucas's head and walked him back to bed. But sleep would not return to me. Not tonight. The next morning, our modest little home buzzed with routine. Cereal bowls clinking, Emma humming a made-up tune, Lucas searching for his backpack as if he hadn't put it in the same place every day for the past 5 months. Life here was uncomplicated. Here I was not overshadowed or unwanted. After dropping them at school, I headed to work at the public library. The quiet aisles, the smell of old paper, the low hum of computers, it always calmed me. But today, my hands were restless. My thoughts kept drifting back to the envelope, the frame missing from the wall, the tension in my mother's eyes. Around noon, while shelving books, my phone buzzed again. A new email. "Unknown sender, about your grandmother's last request." No message body, no attachments, just that one line. A cold prickle moved down my spine. My grandmother Harriet Hart had always been the only family member who made me feel seen. She once slipped me a note on my 15th birthday that read, "Remember who you are, not who they tell you to be." It was still tucked inside an old journal at home. Why would someone email me now about her last request? And why, anonymously, I tucked the phone away, but the unease clung to me like a shadow the rest of the day. When I returned home that afternoon, Lucas was waiting at the top of the staircase, holding a torn envelope, his face flushed with excitement and uncertainty. "This came through the mail slot," he said, "but the guy who dropped it ran away right after. I think he didn't want you to see him." I took the envelope. No return address, no name. Just my name, handwritten in a style I hadn't seen since my breath caught. It was my grandmother's handwriting. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of aged paper, yellowed and faintly creased. The handwriting was unmistakable. "Don't forget what is yours. Don't let them bury it." A tiny metal sound hit the floor. Lucas picked it up and held it out to me. "Mom, this fell out." It was a small brass key, old, worn, cold, in my palm. Recognition hit me like a memory rising from deep water. I had seen this key once before, when I was small enough to crawl into my grandmother's lap. She had shown it to me briefly before tucking it into a little velvet pouch, whispering, "One day you will know." I had forgotten. Or maybe I had been made to forget. I sat down slowly on the stairs, the letter trembling in my hands. Lucas sat beside me, leaning his head on my arm. "Is it important?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes, I think it is." Later, after dinner and homework time, I pulled out my laptop. Something in me refused to let the day's clues rest. I searched the county probate records for Harriet Hart. Most of the documents were standard, but one line stopped me cold. Addendum C, filed but sealed. Sealed. Hidden. Missing from the public index. My father had told me the will was simple. Equal shares, no complications. But sealed meant something had been added and then deliberately concealed. What if Addendum C contained something my family didn't want me to know? As I read deeper, Lucas slipped into the living room with an old book from my grandmother's collection. I watched him flip through it, his fingers tracing the inscription Harriet had written inside. He suddenly looked up. "Mom, there's something here." He held out a torn piece of paper that must have been stuck between the pages. The faded ink read, "Beneficiary, Olivia Hart, Addendum C." My pulse jumped. There it was. My name, tied to a legal document they had removed. I sat down beside him. "Where did you find this?" "In the book she gave me," he said simply. I felt something shift inside me, a rearranging of truth, of memory, of purpose. My grandmother had been trying to protect me, even after death. I looked at Lucas, then at Emma across the room, drawing a picture of a house with smoke curling from the chimney. A house that looked nothing like our townhouse. It looked like Heartstone Lodge. I placed the brass key, the torn paper, and the letter on the table. 3 small pieces of a much larger truth. Pieces that had been hidden, not lost. "Mom," Lucas asked softly, "does this have to do with why we weren't invited?" I took a long breath, smoothing his hair. "I think it does," I said. "I think our family is hiding something, and when people hide something, they push away anyone who might find it." He nodded, slowly, thoughtful beyond his years. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I stood at the window looking out at the quiet street. Snowflakes drifted lazily under the streetlights. That was when I saw it. A car idling across the street. Headlights off. Engine humming quietly. Watching. My heart tightened. The SUV from earlier. Someone had followed me home. I let the curtain fall slowly, my hands steady despite the cold shiver down my spine. They didn't exclude my children to protect a wedding. They excluded me because they were terrified I might finally uncover the truth they had buried for years. And now I wasn't just suspicious, I was certain. Whatever they were hiding, I was going to find it. I woke before sunrise, long before my alarm, with the image of that dark SUV still lingering in my mind. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the heater and the whisper of snow tapping against the windows. For a moment I lay there listening to the silence, to my own racing thoughts, to the odd certainty growing inside me. Whatever my family was hiding, they were afraid of me finding it, and that fear had driven them to cut my children out, erase my presence, even rewrite the story of who belonged in our family. I sat up slowly, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. When I stepped into the hallway, Lucas was already awake, curled up on the couch with a book. He looked up at me with that quiet, observant gaze of his. Emma snored softly on the other end of the couch, wrapped like a little burrito in her blanket. "Morning," he said. "Morning, sweetheart." I lowered myself beside him, my shoulder brushing his. "Did you sleep okay?" He shrugged. "I had dreams about Grandma Harriet. She was reading to me." The simplicity of that statement hit me right in the center of the chest. Harriet had always been gentle, warm, the kind of woman who made everything feel softer. She had been the only person in the Hart family who never treated me like an inconvenience. "She would have liked that," I whispered. He nodded, thoughtful. "Mom, do you think she knew something was wrong with the family?" "Like, a long time ago," I looked at him. His face, still round with childhood, carried a sadness that made him look too wise for his age. "Yes," I said quietly. "I think she did." The morning unfolded slowly. Breakfast was peanut butter toast, orange slices, and warm mugs of cocoa. The kids talked about their plans for the day. Emma wanted to build snowmen by the school playground. Lucas wanted to check out a new book from the library. I watched them, committing every detail to memory. Their laughter, their joy, their ease. It reminded me why I had never returned to the mansion after Harriet passed, why I'd chosen this life instead. At the library, my co-workers greeted me with their usual warmth. I tried to lose myself in the comfort of routine reshelving returns, helping patrons find books, stamping due dates, but the unease from the night before lingered. Halfway through my shift, my phone buzzed. Another email. Same sender, no subject. About your grandmother's last request. No text, no explanation. Just that one line again. I stared at it for several seconds, the hairs on my arms rising. Something about the phrasing felt urgent, intentional, as if someone was trying to warn me or guide me. I put the phone away, though the unease stayed with me like a second shadow. When I picked up the kids that afternoon, snowflakes dusted their hair as they tumbled into the car, chattering about playground adventures and how Emma had accidentally thrown a snowball at her art teacher. I smiled, truly smiled, for the first time that day and drove home through the quiet stretch of winter roads. The townhouse glowed warmly in the fading light as we stepped inside. Lucas kicked off his boots. Emma ran to show me a drawing she'd made of our family stick figures, crooked hearts, in a big house that looked suspiciously like Heartstone Lodge. As I hung up their coats, Lucas tugged at my sleeve. "Mom, there's something weird." My heart jumped. "What is it?" He pointed toward the staircase. At the top step sat the torn envelope and brass key we'd found earlier, exactly where I'd left them after reading Harriet's letter. But beside them was a small piece of folded paper I hadn't seen before. "I found it in the book Grandma gave me," he said. "I don't know how long it's been there." I climbed the stairs and picked up the paper. Faded ink, torn edges, my heart hammering. Beneficiary Olivia Hart. Addendum C, my name. Connected to the sealed document the probate records pretended didn't exist. A chill went through me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake in the will. Someone had intentionally buried whatever my grandmother had left me, and someone else, whether friend or stranger, was trying to help me uncover it. I sat on the top step, the letter trembling in my fingers. Lucas sat beside me again, leaning against my arm. His presence always made me stronger, steadier. "What does it mean?" he asked softly. "It means your grandmother wanted us to know something," I said. "Something important." Emma wandered over, climbing into my lap as though sensing the shift in the air, her small hands wrapped around the brass key. "What's this for?" she asked. "A door," I answered. "Maybe one we haven't opened yet." That evening after dinner, I opened my laptop and searched again through the county probate site. This time I dug deeper, scanning every document, every amendment, every signature. And then I found it. Addendum C, filed but sealed. Filed but sealed. For sealed documents, there should have been a reference number, a data clerk's note. Instead, the system displayed a blank field, something that should not have been possible without deliberate intervention. Someone had gone through a lot of trouble to erase Addendum C, but they had missed pieces. Grandmother's letter, the torn document corner, the brass key, the email, and the person in the SUV. The more I pieced together, the clearer it became my exclusion from Caroline's wedding had nothing to do with image. It had everything to do with fear. Fear that I would step too close to something fragile, something they had constructed with lies. Lucas sat at the table with me, reading quietly while I typed notes. Emma colored nearby, humming her favorite tune. The safety of this small world contrasted painfully with the secrecy of the family mansion. I stared again at the key. Its metal worn smooth. A memory surfaced, my grandmother holding the same key when I was a child, whispering, "One day you'll need the truth more than comfort." Back then, I didn't understand. Now every word of it made sense. When the kids were finally asleep, I stood in the living room and stared out at the snowy street. And there it was again, a car idling in the dark, not moving, not leaving, just watching. The same SUV. I backed away slowly, my hand gripping the curtain. My pulse quickened, but my fear was clear and controlled. Because now I knew something with absolute certainty. My family wasn't trying to protect a wedding. They were trying to protect a secret tied to the will, a secret tied to the lodge, a secret tied to me. And if they were willing to follow me silently, anonymously, then whatever they'd buried was worth far more than I'd ever imagined. I let the curtain fall closed. For the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar and steady bloom inside me. Resolve. They wanted me to stay quiet. They wanted me to keep my distance. They wanted me to remain the daughter who never questioned, never challenged, never claimed what was hers. But I wasn't that daughter anymore. I walked upstairs, kissed my children on their foreheads, and whispered silently into the dark, "I will protect you, I will honor her, and I will find the truth." On the morning of Caroline's wedding, snow fell in slow, quiet spirals outside my window, coating the street in a white so soft, it almost made the world look peaceful. I stood in my small kitchen watching Lucas and Emma make shapes in the fog on the glass, their little fingers tracing hearts and stars. They were blissfully unaware that today was supposed to be a family celebration, a day they'd been cut out of without mercy. "Are we going somewhere today, Mom?" Emma asked, turning toward me with hopeful eyes. "No, sweetheart," I said gently. "Today we stay home." "Okay." She grinned, unbothered. Kids have a way of accepting things without bitterness. Adults, on the other hand, we learn bitterness by being taught it. Lucas glanced at me with quiet understanding. He sensed the heaviness in me, even when I tried to hide it. "We can play games later," he offered softly. I kissed the top of his head. I'd like that. But inside, something twisted. This should have been a day of family photographs, laughter, and clinking glasses. Instead, my children were excluded as if they were burdens, a judgment I would never forget. I poured coffee, trying to settle my nerves, when my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Marianne, the cousin who always tried to soften blows the rest of the family delivered. "They're telling guests you're on a work trip. They don't want anyone asking about your kids." I stared at the message until my chest tightened. They weren't protecting the wedding, they were protecting their lie. They couldn't risk anyone seeing the real story, the one with cracks and betrayals and sealed documents hidden in courthouse files. I typed back only one word, "Thanks." Then I put the phone face down. At the lodge miles away, I knew my family was scrambling, doing damage control from the viral tantrum Caroline had the day before the wedding. But out here in my little home, the world was still. It gave me space to think, to breathe, to prepare. I took a slow sip of coffee, feeling the brass key in my pocket press against me, the physical reminder that I wasn't imagining things, that my grandmother had left me threads to follow. That something big was unraveling. Then a different idea came to me, arriving so quietly I almost didn't notice it at first. I walked to my bookshelf and pulled down the old family photo album Harriet had given me years ago. Its cover was faded blue, the fabric a little worn at the edges. I flipped through the pages slowly, seeing my childhood flash by birthdays, summers, Harriet's soft smile as she held my hand. Halfway through, I found the picture that had changed everything yesterday. Harriet standing in front of Heartstone Lodge with the brass key in her hand. The same key that now sat warm in my pocket. On the back of the photo, her handwriting read, "When the house forgets who it belongs to, remind them." I traced the words slowly. They felt heavier, now alive with meaning. Quiet revenge doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it comes in small, sharp truths delivered at exactly the right moment. I picked up a small box from the closet, plain brown, unassuming. Inside, I placed the photo, the handwritten message still intact. Then I added a single white lily, Harriet's favorite flower. Not roses or orchids or any of the grandiose arrangements Caroline loved. Just a lily, simple, elegant, honest. Along with it, I wrote a note. No insult, no accusations. Just a single sentence I hope the house remembers today. I sealed the box, wrote Bride's Sweet Heartstone Lodge on the label, and called a courier service. When the driver arrived, a young man with bright eyes and frost on his jacket, he studied the box curiously before tucking it under his arm. "You're not the first person sending something anonymously there today," he remarked. My pulse stuttered. "I'm not," he shook his head. "Third one this morning." "Do you know who?" He shrugged. "No names, just drop-offs." As the door closed behind him, I stood still, absorbing that information. Someone else was sending messages to Caroline. Someone else was stirring the water. I didn't know whether that should comfort me or terrify me. At Heartstone Lodge, the wedding preparations were in full force. I could imagine the ballroom glowing with crystal chandeliers, the floor polished so perfectly it could reflect a person's mistakes back at them. Guests in shimmering dresses. A string quartet. Caroline in her designer gown. And then the package arriving. Just thinking about her opening it, something like justice warmed me from the inside. I stayed home baking cookies with the kids' Christmas-shaped ones stars and little trees covered with powdered sugar. The house filled with the scent of butter and vanilla softening the ache in my chest. We played board games. We laughed. We made a mess with frosting. For a moment I forgot the sharpness of rejection. But the world didn't forget me. My phone buzzed repeatedly. Cousins, friends, even old high school acquaintances. Have you seen this video? Caroline is losing it at the wedding. Olivia, are you okay? What is happening? I opened one of the clips reluctantly. Caroline stood in her bridal sweet face, flushed red hair, half done screaming at someone off camera, while clutching the lily from my package. She shook the photo in the air as if it were a threat. WHO sent this. Who did this? A bridesmaid tried to calm her. Maybe it's nothing. It's her, Caroline shrieked. She's trying to ruin my day. The clip ended abruptly, but not before her voice cracked into something broken and unhinged. I set the phone down slowly. No satisfaction came, just a strange quiet. A hollow awareness that this was only the beginning. Mom, Lucas asked from the table. "Why's your phone going crazy?" I smiled softly. Nothing we need to worry about right now. But in my heart, I knew everything was shifting. Later that evening, after the kids settled into bed, I made myself a cup of tea and sat near the window. Snow drifted under the streetlights like falling glitter. The world seemed calm again, but my phone rang suddenly, breaking the stillness. The screen glowed blocked number. I answered, cautious. "Hello," a trembling voice whispered. "Olivia, it's your mother." My hand tightened around the phone. "Mom, I need to see you," she said, her words catching. "Tonight, please." I closed my eyes. Something in her tone, frantic, afraid, told me whatever had happened at the wedding wasn't the real disaster. "What's wrong?" I asked gently. Her breath shook through the line. "It's your father," she whispered. "After the wedding, something happened. Something you need to know." I stood up slowly, a chill racing along my spine. "What happened, Mom?" She swallowed audibly, fear thick in her voice. "He knows you took something from the house," she said, "and he's furious." "Olivia, he's not going to let this go." My heartbeat thudded once hard. "I didn't take anything," I said quietly. "I only reminded the house of the truth." "You need to be careful," she whispered urgently. "He's not the man you think he is." The line went silent for a moment. Then my mother said words I never expected to hear from her. "I think he's been hiding something from all of us. Something about your grandmother. Something much bigger than the wedding." My breath caught. "What do you mean?" Her voice dropped to a fragile whisper. "Your father went into the attic today. He asked where grandmother's things were kept. He knows someone was in there, Olivia, and he's terrified." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. Terrified of what my mother's answer was almost too soft to hear, of the truth. My mother stood on my doorstep with her coat still dusted in snow, her breath visible in the cold air, and her eyes wide with the kind of fear I hadn't seen since childhood. She didn't wait for an invitation. She stepped inside, quickly glancing over her shoulder as if someone might have followed her. The moment the door shut behind us, her shoulders sagged, and she looked smaller than I ever remembered her looking. "Mom," I whispered. "What happened?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she scanned my living room, the soft lights, the children's drawings taped to the wall, the quiet that lived so naturally in this house. Her hands shook as she unbuttoned her coat. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. "What happened at the wedding?" She swallowed her throat tight. "It isn't your fault, Olivia." My breath stilled. She wouldn't have driven through a snowstorm at night to tell me that. Then whose fault is it, I asked? She lowered herself onto the edge of my couch, fingers twisting together in her lap. She looked like she wanted to disappear into the cushions. Your father's, Caroline's, and her voice broke. Mine. The room felt too quiet, the air too heavy. Mom, I said, gently sitting beside her. What are you trying to say? She looked up at me then, really looked, and I saw guilt, exhaustion, and love tugging at every line on her face. We shouldn't have hidden what your grandmother left for you. Every bone in my body went cold. My grandmother, the sealed addendum C, the letters, the missing photo, my exclusion from the wedding, the SUV outside my house. It all shifted into focus like pieces of a puzzle snapping into place. What did you hide? I pressed barely above a whisper. I don't know everything, she said shakily. But I knew Harriet left you more than your father ever told you. I knew she wanted something different for you. Different. How Mom shook her head. I can't say. Not here. If your father knew I came, she broke off, pressing a trembling hand to her mouth. He's not the man you think he is. A sharp knock of dread hit my chest. What do you mean? I asked. She looked at me, eyes shimmering. He's always been so careful, so controlled. But today, after the wedding, something snapped. He went into the attic, the one place he never touched after Harriet died. He demanded to know what was missing. He asked about things we boxed up years ago. He thinks someone took something. My heart hammered painfully. He knew. He knew someone had been in the attic. He knew someone had opened the cedar chest. Mom, I whispered, why did he hide addendum C? At the name she flinched. She didn't ask what I was talking about. That told me everything. I didn't want to lose my family, she said in a hoarse whisper. I went along with him because I thought it would protect us. I thought it was harmless, but it wasn't harmless. Your father said the addendum would complicate business. He said it would destroy the family image. But it wasn't about image, Olivia. It was about control. My throat tightened with a fury I couldn't contain. Control. Always control. Control of money. Control of reputation. Control of inheritance. Control of me. And my children, I asked. Were they not suitable because of control too? She covered her face with both hands. They were afraid your children would ask questions, that other people would remember how close they were to Harriet, that someone might realize Harriet favored you. They didn't exclude them because they misbehaved, Olivia. They excluded them because they were evidence. The words ripped through me. They erased my children to protect a lie, I whispered. My mother nodded, tearful. Yes. The anger inside me burned white-hot, not loud, not explosive, but steady and cold. A clean kind of anger, the kind that doesn't break you, it builds you. My mother reached for me then, desperate. I'm so sorry. I tried to stop him. I told him it was wrong. But he said the business needed to come first, that the Hart legacy depended on it. The Hart legacy, I said bitterly. Harriet would be ashamed. Mom nodded again, her voice trembling. Your grandmother wanted to change how the family operated. She wanted the lodge to go to the person who understood its history. She wanted your children to grow up connected to something honest. And they stole it, I finished. She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded paper. I wasn't brave then. But I am trying to be brave now. This is something Harriet left behind, something I never gave your father. I unfolded it slowly. It wasn't a will. It wasn't addendum C. It was a receipt from a law office dated 2 weeks after Harriet's death. And across the top, written in Harriet's familiar slanted handwriting, were 7 words she never wanted it this way. H.H. The breath left my lungs. Mom wiped her tears. Your father went there yesterday. He was asking if they had a second copy, if anything had been filed. He knows something is slipping out of his control. Of course he did. That was how he operated. He didn't feel guilt, he felt panic. I folded the paper and tucked it against my chest. Mom, what exactly was addendum C? Her eyes darted away. Fear, guilt, remorse. It mentioned you, she whispered. Your name was in it. Harriet wanted something that Richard didn't. Something that would have changed everything. What did she want? I pressed. I don't know the exact wording, but your father said it threatened the structure of Heartstone Holdings. He called it dangerous. He told me not to ask questions. And her face crumpled. I listened to him. I let fear win. I took her hand. Not anymore. A vibration buzzed through my pocket. A new text. I pulled out my phone. Blocked number, we need to meet. I was your grandmother's attorney. My stomach flipped. Another message followed. I have the original Addendum C. My pulse pounded so loudly it drowned out every other sound in the room. Mom saw my expression and whispered, Olivia. What is it? I clenched the phone tightly. It means the truth wasn't destroyed. Someone kept it alive. She pressed a hand over her heart as if trying to steady it. Then everything is about to change. I looked at her, this woman who had spent her entire life bending under my father's power, and I felt something soften inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. She touched my cheek gently the way she used to when I was small. Be careful, she whispered. Please. I nodded. I will. She left a few minutes later, disappearing into the snowy night. When the door closed behind her, I stood alone in the quiet, staring at the folded receipt and the unread message on my phone. The house felt still. Too still. The air full of truths ready to burst open. I walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. The SUV was back. Watching. Waiting. But this time I didn't hide. This time I didn't flinch. This time I stared right back. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what was in the shadows. The shadows were afraid of me. The cafe was nearly empty when I walked in the early morning chill, still clinging to my coat as I scanned the dimly lit interior. A few students with laptops, an older couple sharing a muffin, the barista humming softly under her breath, nothing out of place. But the air around me carried a quiet tension, a sense that the next hour would change everything. I chose the seat by the back window, the one the text message had instructed. My hands wrapped around a cup of hot tea, but the warmth didn't calm the steady beat of my pulse. I kept my eyes on the door, counting every person who walked in. 5 minutes passed. 7, 10. Then a man in his 60s approached, gray coat, scarf, neatly wrapped glasses reflecting the morning light. He paused at my table, studying me with careful eyes. Olivia Hart, he asked. Yes. He sat down slowly. My name is Alan Pierce. I was your grandmother's estate attorney. My breath caught. Even hearing the word grandmother felt like someone striking a match in a dark room. He folded his hands on the table. I'm aware this meeting is unexpected, but given what's happened recently, I believe Harriet would want you to know the truth. What truth? I asked quietly. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thin folder. The truth your father worked very hard to hide. My heartbeat thudded once hard. Alan opened the folder and slid a document toward me. It was a photocopy, faded, creased, but unmistakably official. The header read, Addendum C, Estate of Harriet Hart. Only the cover page. Only the beginning. But it was real. This is all I could recover, he said. The original was stolen from my office years ago. My fingers trembled slightly as I touched the page. This mentions me. Yes, Alan said. Harriet intended to designate you as the primary heir to Heartstone Lodge. My chest tightened. The lodge, he nodded. Your grandmother believed you were the only one in the family who understood its history. She wanted it to pass to you, not to your father, not to Caroline, to you. Memories flooded me, summer mornings, reading by the fireplace, Harriet, brushing my hair the way she'd say, this house needs someone who listens. All this time I thought those were just sweet moments between us. But they had been more. They had been her choosing me. My father said her will was simple, I whispered. A lie, Alan said bluntly. Harriet updated her will several times. Addendum C was her final instruction. I stared at the paper in front of me, feeling anger and grief and vindication weaving together. "Why hide it?" I asked. Alan sighed. "Your father was afraid. The family business was struggling when Harriet died. He wanted full control. Addendum C complicated things. He convinced your mother not to question him and pressured me to simplify the will. When I refused, the document disappeared from the probate office." I closed my eyes. "He stole my grandmother's wishes." "He did more than that," Alan said. "He stole your inheritance and your children's." A sharp breath escaped me. My grandmother had loved Lucas and Emma, but she hadn't been around long enough to leave them memories. Still, she had seen them, known them, wanted something for them, and my father had buried it. Alan's voice softened. "Your grandmother trusted you. That is why I'm here. You deserve to know everything." I reached into my bag and pulled out the brass key. "Do you know what this is?" His eyes widened. "I haven't seen that key in years." He leaned closer. "Harriet kept a private records chest in the attic of the lodge. That key opens it." My breath stilled. "I found the chest." And his voice tightened with anticipation. "I found letters, photos, drafts, handwritten notes." He pressed a trembling hand to his mouth. "Then she truly prepared for this." "I don't understand," I said. "Prepared for what?" "For Richard," he replied quietly. She knew how he operated. She worried he would erase anything that didn't benefit him. She predicted he'd try to hide the addendum. My grandmother had predicted my father's betrayal, had planned for it, had left clues, letters, photos, a key to help me find the truth. She couldn't defend herself. My throat tightened painfully. Alan reached into his folder again and pulled out a maintenance report. "There's more. I found this in the county archive yesterday." It was old, stamped nearly a decade ago, signed by Harriet herself. In the margins, written in her handwriting, was a note: "Storage alcove behind the hearth." Hearth, not the attic. A different part of the house. Harriet hid something else, Alan said. Something she didn't trust anyone else with. "What?" I whispered. "I don't know. But with everything happening, I'd bet it connects to Addendum C." I set the paper aside, my mind racing. Why now? Why reach out to me after all these years? His expression sober, he said. "Because your father and Caroline made this public when they excluded your children. And because the meltdown at the wedding drew attention. People are asking questions, reporters are digging, and when things start to crack in public, the hidden pieces shift." I remembered the SUV. The feeling of being watched. "They've been following me," I said quietly. Alan's eyebrows lifted. "That wouldn't surprise me. They're terrified you'll uncover something. I already have." "And they know that," he replied. "Your entrance into the attic probably sent Richard into a panic. If he realizes Addendum C survived, he'll try to stop you." Something cold settled inside my chest, not fear but clarity. "What do I do now?" I asked. "Find what Harriet hid behind the hearth," Alan said firmly. "And prepare. If Addendum C survived, the ramifications for your father are enormous." I nodded slowly. "I'll go back to the lodge." He hesitated, then leaned in. "Be careful, Olivia. Secrets worth hiding are often worth fighting for." We stepped outside together. Snow had begun to fall again, dusting the pavement in white flakes. Alan walked toward his car, but I paused at mine. That was when I saw it, the dark SUV, parked across the street, watching, waiting. My pulse quickened, but something inside me hardened rather than shook. I unlocked my car and drove home with purpose building in my chest. The moment I stepped inside the house, Lucas met me at the doorway. "Mom," he said, breathing fast, "you need to see this." He held out a small photograph, one he must have found while I was gone. It was Harriet holding baby Lucas, smiling with a softness I had almost forgotten. On the back in her handwriting were the words, "The truth is in the place they fear most." My breath caught. The hearth, the hidden alcove, the sealed addendum. I looked at my son, then at the photo, then at the brass key still warm in my hand. A sense of destiny, of legacy swept through me. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about my children. This was about Harriet's voice echoing through time. This was about the truth that my family had buried and the fear that made them bury it. I stood at the window again, eyes on the SUV. And instead of stepping back, I stepped closer. Because I finally understood something with absolute certainty. If the truth was buried inside that house, I was going back for it. And this time, I wasn't going to knock. The sky was still dark when I pulled into the farthest corner of the Heartstone Lodge property, the early morning cold biting at my skin as I stepped out of the car. Snow muffled every sound, the world blanketed in a quiet that felt both peaceful and ominous. I zipped my coat higher and moved through the trees toward the side entrance I remembered from childhood, the old maintenance hall that led straight to the back of the house. I hadn't stepped foot here since Harriet died, but my feet knew the path. Every board, every stone, every creak of the old door felt like a memory pressing against my skin. When I slipped inside, the lodge swallowed me with its silence. Warmth hadn't been turned on yet. The same halls that dazzled guests in golden light during weddings and business galas now felt hollow, stripped of charm, echoing with secrets. I moved quickly, staying near the walls. I needed to reach the attic without anyone knowing I was there. But halfway down the hall, I froze. The dark SUV from my neighborhood sat parked near the front entrance, its headlights off. Someone had been here before me. My pulse stuttered. I forced myself to breathe, to focus. Whether they were here now didn't matter. I had something they didn't have: my grandmother's map of memories. I reached the staircase that led to the attic and climbed slowly, avoiding the squeaky boards I remembered from childhood. By the time I pushed open the attic door, the sky outside had begun to lighten to a muted gray. The attic smelled of cedar and dust, untouched for years, except for the chaos my father caused yesterday. Boxes were moved, trunks left open, items shifted in hurried disarray. But tucked behind an old Christmas wreath and a stack of suitcases sat the cedar chest. The brass key was warm in my pocket as I knelt beside it. When I slid the key into the lock, it fit perfectly, almost too perfectly, as if the chest had been waiting. The lock clicked open with an unmistakable sound, loud in the stillness. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd found it before: photos, letters, Harriet's notebook documents, some tied with ribbon and others in worn envelopes. But this time I wasn't just searching blindly. This time I knew exactly what I was looking for. I lifted the lid fully and began sorting. Childhood photos of Harriet and me at the lodge, newspaper clippings about the Hart family business, a stack of letters addressed to Richard, her handwriting firm and elegant, notes she had written to herself, reminders, thoughts, worries. But when I reached the bottom of the chest, tucked into a small space beneath a folded blanket, I found something new. A thin, leather-bound notebook. I opened it, breath-catching. Inside were pages and pages of Harriet's writing, entries about her fears, her hopes, her deep concerns about how Richard had begun to restructure the family business. Entry after entry pointed toward a truth Harriet was desperate to preserve: that Richard was manipulating assets, reshaping the inheritance, steering the family legacy into something cold and self-serving. But one particular note made my blood run cold. Olivia is the only one who understands this house. She must inherit it. Caroline sees the lodge as status. Richard sees it as money. Olivia sees it as home. I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth. She had chosen me, and they had stolen that choice. I continued flipping through pages until something slipped out: a folded piece of paper, yellow with age. Inside was a property transfer draft. Heartstone Lodge. Primary beneficiary, Olivia Hart. Not Caroline, not Richard, not the Heartstone Holdings Trust. Me. Everything Harriet had tried to protect had been buried, not by accident, but by intention. The truth stung with a mixture of warmth and heartbreak. A sudden creak in the floorboards jolted me. I snapped the notebook shut, heart pounding. Someone else was in the attic. I peeked around a stack of boxes and caught the faint outline of a tall figure crossing the opposite side before disappearing down the stairs. I held my breath, listening. Footsteps faded. Had they seen me? Had they seen the chest open? I waited still as a stone until the silence returned. When I finally slipped out of the attic, the lights downstairs had flicked on. Someone was here for a reason, and I didn't intend to find out what happened if they caught me. I moved silently through the corridor and back outside into the freezing air. But I wasn't leaving empty-handed. Inside my coat were the notebook, the property transfer draft, and several photos. Evidence they couldn't twist or burn. The lodge loomed behind me, its tall windows dark and watching. And for the first time, I didn't feel like an outcast standing before it. I felt like the rightful heir reclaiming sacred ground. Back home, after making sure Lucas and Emma were ready for school, I laid everything on the dining table. Letters, photos, drafts, the notebook, the truth. Piece by piece, I arranged them chronologically: Harriet's younger years, her notes about me, photos she had tucked away, the draft transferring the lodge to me. Emma climbed onto a chair beside me. "Mom, what are you doing?" "Something for Christmas," I said quietly. "What is it, a truth wall?" She smiled, handing me a pack of tape. Lucas joined us too, carefully arranging photos of Harriet holding him as a baby. "She looks happy here," he said softly. "She was," I whispered. For the first time in years, I felt Harriet in the room. Her warmth, her strength, her quiet defiance. I stepped back, looking at the display we'd built. It wasn't pretty in the way my family valued pretty. It wasn't curated or polished or dripping in wealth. But it was honest. It was real. It was mine, and it was hers. Later, while the kids played in the living room, I added the final touch: Harriet's note. "This house remembers." My phone buzzed. A new message. "Blocked number. They know you were at the lodge today." My stomach tightened. Another message: "They will not let you show what you found." I stared at the words, feeling a cold calm settle over me. For so long I had been afraid of their power, of my father's voice, of Caroline's cruelty, of the weight of the heart name. Not anymore. I looked at the truth wall, glowing softly in the lamplight. I looked at my children laughing on the carpet, and I whispered, "Let them come." Because this time they wouldn't find a silent daughter who walked away. They would find a woman who refused to be erased. Snow glittered like shattered glass along the sidewalks as Christmas Eve settled over the town, soft and deceptively peaceful. Inside my small townhouse, the scent of cinnamon and pine drifted through the rooms as Lucas and Emma put the finishing touches on our simple decorations. Paper stars, hand-painted ornaments, and the little felt stockings they'd made in school. Everything felt warm and honest, untouched by the cold games my family played at Hearthstone Lodge. I had just placed a tray of gingerbread cookies on the table when my phone buzzed. A new message appeared from my mother. "We're coming tonight, all of us." I stared at the words until the screen dimmed. My breath caught in my throat. They were coming here. Not the lodge, not the church. Here. Into my home where warmth wasn't staged for the cameras but lived in the walls. Mom, Lucas called from the living room. "Can I hang my ornament on the big tree this year?" "Of course you can," I said softly, though my mind was already racing. I checked the window. Snow was falling harder now. Wind whispered against the glass. Something in the air felt charged, like the few seconds before lightning crashes. By sundown, the kids had changed into their matching red pajamas, and I was lighting candles when Lucas's voice broke through the quiet. "They're here." I turned to see him standing at the window, hands pressed to the glass. Headlights glowed in the darkness as a long line of cars crawled toward my house. My mother's car, my father's Caroline's sleek white sedan, and even a few extended relatives trailing behind like a slow-moving storm. When I opened the door, the cold hit first, then the faces. My mother stepped forward, her smile thin and brittle. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." Behind her, my father looked stiff, disapproving, as if the sight of my modest home offended him. Caroline, wrapped in an expensive coat with fur trim, surveyed my porch as though she'd stepped into a thrift store by accident. "This place is small," she muttered, her voice dripping polite disgust. I smiled politely. "It's where the truth fits." They didn't understand what that meant, not yet. Lucas and Emma ran up to greet them holding handmade cards. My father barely acknowledged them. Caroline forced a smile before whispering under her breath, "Try not to make a mess, okay?" My jaw tightened. Inside, the warmth of the house contrasted sharply with the cold that followed my family through the door. My relatives murmured compliments forced hollow. "Such a cozy home," one aunt said. "A little rustic," another whispered, not quietly enough. My father paced the entryway, eyes darting around like an inspector searching for flaws. "No drama tonight, Olivia," he said quietly, sternly. I nodded. "I agree." Caroline brushed past me, stopping abruptly as her gaze snagged on the curtain I had hung across one full wall of the dining room. The faint outline of photographs beneath the fabric made her frown. "What's that?" she asked sharply. "A display," I said simply. She stared suspiciously, but before she could investigate further, a knock sounded at the door behind us. The dark SUV rolled slowly past my house tires, whispering on the snow. My heart thudded once hard. But it didn't stop me. Dinner began with tense small talk. My mother complimented the gingerbread cookies. My aunt told Emma she'd grown taller. My father asked if I planned to get a real job soon. Caroline checked her phone so frequently the screen created a constant glow on her smug face. The atmosphere hummed with static. My children, bless them, tried so hard to fill the silence with stories about school, but their grandparents barely listened. When dessert plates were cleared, I stood. "I have something to share." A hush fell over the room. With one slow movement, I stepped toward the curtain. Caroline shifted uneasily. "Olivia, what are you?" I pulled the curtain aside. Gasps broke through the air like shattered glass. The photo wall of truth stood before them, every carefully chosen piece, illuminated by strings of soft white lights. Harriet's handwritten letters. Photos of me as a child in her arms. Photos of Lucas as a baby, with Harriet's frail hands cupping his cheeks. Copies of the property transfer draft. The letter to Richard saying, "This lodge must remain hers." And Harriet's note at the center, "This house belongs to the one who carries its warmth." My mother clasped her hand to her mouth, tears slipping down her cheeks. Caroline stumbled backward, face draining of color. What is this?" My father's jaw clenched so tightly I heard his teeth grind. I stepped in front of the wall. "This is what you tried to erase." A murmur rippled through the relatives. "Is that Olivia was supposed to inherit? Why wasn't this disclosed?" Caroline's snapped voice shrill. "None of this is relevant. They're old photos, old letters." Mom was confused at the end. "She wasn't," I said firmly. "And you know it." Caroline's fiancé, new, polished, unfamiliar, stepped forward. "You never told me about this," he said, suspicion lacing his tone. Caroline glared at him. "It doesn't matter." "It does," I replied, my voice soft but unyielding. "It matters that you called my children not suitable when they were the ones Harriet loved most. It matters that you erased them because their presence reminded people of the truth." Caroline's face twisted. "You ruined my wedding." "No," I said calmly. "The truth ruined your wedding." My father stepped forward, towering voice low and controlled. "Take this down, Olivia. No. This is a family matter that should have stayed buried." I met his eyes steady. Like addendum C, gasps erupted. Richard's face changed. Shock, rage, fear. "That document never existed," he snapped. My mother's trembling voice cut through the room. "Stop lying." Everyone turned. Her shoulders shook as she wiped her tears. Harriet wanted the lodge to go to Olivia. She told me herself. "I've been silent long enough." Caroline stared at her, betrayed. "Mom," my mother shook her head. Harriet saw what this family was becoming. A painful quiet settled over the room. I stepped closer to the wall, placing my hand over the photo of Harriet holding Lucas. "They're old photos, old letters." Mom was confused at the end. "She wasn't," I said firmly. "And you know it." Caroline's fiancé, new, polished, unfamiliar, stepped forward. You never told me about this, he said, suspicion lacing his tone. Caroline glared at him. It doesn't matter. It does, I replied, my voice, soft but unyielding. It matters that you called my children not suitable when they were the ones Harriet loved most. The room fell silent, every eye on me, every secret trembling on the edge of collapse. This isn't about revenge, I said quietly. This is about truth. And this Christmas the truth came home. For the first time in years I felt the house, the real house, not the mansion filled with something warm and fierce, not bitterness, not pain, not rage, clarity, and Harriet's presence bright and steady. It matters that you erase them because their presence reminded people of the truth. Caroline's face twisted. You ruined my wedding. No, I said calmly. The truth ruined your wedding. My father stepped forward, towering voice low and controlled. Take this down, Olivia. No. This is a family matter that should have stayed buried. I met his eyes steady. Like addendum C gasps erupted. Richard's face changed. Shock, rage, fear. That document never existed, he snapped. I stood before the truth wall again, letting the moment settle into my bones. Tomorrow, I thought, would be the beginning of the end. Because now the family wasn't just shaken, they were afraid. The morning after Christmas felt strangely quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Snow covered the streets in thick, unbroken sheets, muffling every sound. My house, usually filled with the kids' laughter even on early mornings, felt suspended, still warming from the storm of last night's revelations. I stood at the kitchen counter making coffee when my phone buzzed with a message that snapped everything into motion. Your father was escorted out of Heartstone Holdings this morning. No name attached, no context. Just that. I stared at the screen long enough for the coffee in my mug to grow cold. The words repeated in my mind, breaking apart the last remnants of the life I thought I understood. My father, Richard Hart, escorted out was something I never imagined reading. But last night's confrontation had already shifted the ground beneath all of us. The cracks were widening. Before I could process it, another notification lit up my phone. Local news update: Heartstone Holdings under internal investigation. Possible irregularities in probate filings. I sank into a chair. The world outside might still be asleep, but the Hart family had just entered a storm it couldn't hide from. A knock at the door startled me. I peeked through the peephole before opening it just a crack. A reporter stood there, bundled in a heavy coat, holding a microphone. Miss Hart? Is it true your grandmother intended you to inherit the lodge? Do you have any comment about the investigation? I shut the door before the cold air or her questions could slip in. Not yet, I thought. They didn't deserve my voice, not until I understood the whole truth. The kids came downstairs soon after, rubbing sleep from their eyes, blissfully unaware of the tectonic shift happening outside these walls. I made them breakfast, helped Lucas with a math puzzle, tied Emma's bow, and walked them through their morning like nothing had changed. But everything had. Once they were settled with a movie. I sat with my laptop at the dining table, the same one that held the photo wall of truth only hours before, and began researching Heartstone Holdings. The news stories multiplied by the minute. Words like fraud, irregularities, financial tampering, sealed probate, missing filings appeared too often, too familiar. While scrolling, my phone vibrated again. Caroline, you ruined everything. I'll fix what you broke. You don't deserve anything. Her desperation leaked from every word. Then another message, this one from an unknown number. She's losing her mind, and everyone saw it last night. Video clips were attached. I didn't open them. I didn't need to. Caroline losing control had been inevitable. But the next voicemail made my stomach twist. Caroline's fiancé left her, Marianne whispered in a shaky voice. He said he doesn't want to be part of a family drowning in lies. I leaned back, let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The dominoes were falling. By midday, my phone rang again, Alan Pierce's voice on the other end. Olivia, we need to meet. Something has come up. Within an hour, I was in his office. Papers covered his desk, some marked with red tabs, others with yellow highlights. He looked exhausted, like he'd aged 5 years overnight. "Richard has been altering assets," Alan said. "We found evidence this morning." He rerouted sections of the estate into shell companies completely off the official record. I swallowed hard. "He erased Addendum C too." Alan nodded grimly. "It goes deeper. Probate tampering is only the beginning." He pulled out a set of documents and handed one to me. "This is a copy of the altered probate filing. Look at the signature date." I stared. The date didn't match the timeline of my grandmother's final days. It had been changed, pulled earlier, backdated. "This is illegal," I whispered. "Yes," Alan said. "It could put him in prison." My hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the weight of what it meant. My father hadn't just removed my name from Harriet's wishes. He'd rewritten the legal structure of our family, of our inheritance, of our history. "He must have panicked after last night," Alan added. "People are talking. Someone tipped off the regulators this morning." "Not me," I said. "No," he agreed. "Someone within the family, I think. Someone tired of the lies." I immediately thought of my mother's trembling hands, her watery eyes, her whispered apologies. Before I could say anything, Alan leaned forward. "There's something else." He slid a folder toward me. Inside was a financial statement, an old one printed on yellowed paper. At the top, in Harriet's handwriting, was my children's initials, LH and EH. "What is this?" I asked, confusion threading through my voice. "Education trusts," he explained. "Harriet created them for Lucas and Emma, substantial ones. Funds meant to support them through college, even future ventures." My breath hitched. "My kids." "Yes," he said softly. "Your father never disclosed them. They should have been transferred to your custody years ago." Anger, sharp, clean electric, cut through me. "He didn't hide things just from me," I whispered. "He hid things from them." "He saw your children as a threat," Alan said quietly. "Their existence connected you to Harriet in ways he couldn't erase." I closed the folder, hands shaking, heart steadying. Everything he had done, every exclusion, every lie, every manipulation had been intentional, calculated, cruel. When I returned home, the house felt different. My mother sat in the living room waiting for me, cheeks pale, eyes red. She held a small folder in her trembling hands. "I found this," she said, voice cracking. "It belonged to your grandmother." I took the folder, expecting documents. Instead, a small locket fell into my hand, silver, worn with age. Harriet's initials engraved on the front. Inside the locket was a folded scrap of paper. Mother watched me, breath held. I unfolded it. "Addendum C lives where the house remembers." The same words I'd seen in Harriet's notebook. "The house remembers," I whispered. "The lodge," my mother said. Harriet always said the lodge had a memory. It hit me then, the attic hadn't been the true hiding place. It had only been part of the trail. "What else did she hide?" I asked. "I don't know," my mother whispered. "But your father has been terrified of the lodge for years. He had rooms sealed, wings closed. He didn't want anyone exploring, because the truth lived there, waiting, breathing, growing." A soft knock came at the door. When I answered it, a neighbor handed me a letter. No return address, no sender. Inside was a single sentence: "They will not let you find it." I glanced across the street. The SUV was back, watching, silent, patient. But this time I wasn't the one who was afraid. I held the locket tight, my grandmother's final message, warming the cold metal. Their kingdom was falling, but what Harriet had left behind was rising, and I was finally ready to uncover it. The county archive smelled like dust and forgotten years, a place where the past lay tucked into metal drawers and dim corners, waiting for someone persistent or desperate enough to dig it up. Snow still clung to my coat as I stepped inside. Alan was already there, hunched over a stack of files beneath a flickering fluorescent light, his glasses slipping down the bridge of his nose. "You found something," I said quietly. He didn't look up immediately. When he finally did, he held a thin document in his hands, the edges yellowed and the ink slightly smudged. "This," he murmured, "is the maintenance report your grandmother filed 10 years ago. It was buried in the wrong drawer." He handed it to me without another word. The moment my fingers touched the page, I recognized Harriet's handwriting, slanted precise, unmistakably hers. The official part of the report listed general inspections of the lodge's north wing, but what stopped me cold were the handwritten notes in the margin storage alcove behind the hearth. Hearth. My heart thumped hard. Harriet had been leaving me breadcrumbs long before she died. "I believe this is a clue," Alan said quietly. "A very intentional one." I nodded slowly. "She always said the house remembers, and I think she meant exactly that." He glanced toward the windows where snow blurred the world into white. "You need to go, before someone else does." Fear fluttered through me, but underneath it was certainty stronger than anything I'd felt before. "I'll go now." Driving to the lodge felt like stepping into another lifetime. The roads were slick with ice, but my hands were steady on the wheel. It wasn't until I pulled off the main road parking behind a row of tall pines that my pulse quickened. The lodge stood silent and imposing, its windows dark, except for the faintest glow from the kitchen. I slipped through the old maintenance entrance again and made my way to the north wing. The air here felt cold, abandoned, like a place suspended in time. The library door groaned softly as I opened it. The smell hit me instantly: old books, wood, faint traces of Harriet's lavender soap clinging to memories only I seemed to notice. The stone hearth stretched along one wall, tall and heavy, the heart of the lodge in my childhood. I moved closer, feeling along the edges. One stone near the base seemed wrong, slightly crooked. I knelt down, my fingers tracing the outline. It shifted under my touch. The brass key might not have been meant for a lock this time, but it worked perfectly as a wedge. I slipped the key into the small gap. With one firm push, the stone loosened and slid outward with a soft scrape. Behind it, in the narrow opening of a hidden alcove, sat a small envelope sealed with red wax. My breath caught. H.H., her initials. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. The paper was old but perfectly preserved. I broke the seal with a careful tear and drew out a folded set of documents. The first line nearly brought me to my knees: Addendum C, final and original. It was handwritten, signed, stamped, dated. Everything my father had tried so hard to erase right here, safe in my hands. The addendum included transfer of Heartstone Lodge to Olivia Hart, establishment of educational trusts for Lucas and Emma, restriction barring the sale or repurposing of the lodge without Olivia's consent. An attached letter addressed to me. I unfolded it with shaking fingers. My dearest Liv, if you are reading this, then you have found what they feared you would find. This house belongs to you. You have always carried its warmth, its memory, and its future. Protect it. And protect the children. They are the legacy I cherish most. Tears blurred my vision. I pressed the letter to my chest, feeling the weight of her love, her trust, her belief in me. I wasn't imagining her presence all these years. She had been guiding me. But there was more. At the bottom of the alcove, wrapped in a piece of cloth, was a small USB drive. I hesitated only for a moment before slipping it into my pocket. Back in the library, I plugged it into my laptop. The audio file crackled softly, then a familiar wavering voice filled the room. "Olivia, if you're hearing this, then what I feared has happened." My breath hitched. Harriet. Her voice was weaker than I remembered, but steady. Determined. "Your father pressured me to sign a simplified will. He wanted control. But the lodge, its history, its spirit was never his. It was passed down through the women of our family. And you, Liv, you are the one who understands it." The recording paused as if she'd needed a breath. I hid Addendum C because I knew he would destroy it. I hid my documents because he watched everything I did. But I could not let him erase you, or the children. Find the alcove behind the hearth. Keep what you find. And know that I loved you with every part of me." A soft click ended the recording. I sat back, tears streaming silently down my cheeks. Everything she'd felt, everything she feared, everything she had fought for it pulsed through that room, through the walls of the lodge, through the very air I breathed. She had been afraid. She had been alone. But she never stopped loving me. A soft noise snapped me from my reverie. Footsteps. Close. I shut my laptop, slipped the documents into my coat, and stepped behind one of the tall bookshelves just as the library door clicked open. Voices drifted inside. "Check the attic again," my father's voice hissed. She must have taken something. Caroline's voice followed, shrill, panicked. "Dad, what if she found it? What if she actually..." "Quiet," he snapped. Their footsteps echoed across the wooden floors. Every hair on my arms rose. If they found me, if they saw what I held, they would take it. Destroy it. Destroy me if they had to. I held my breath as they walked closer, their shadows moving through the library. Then suddenly they turned away. Their footsteps faded. The door shut. I waited another full minute before moving, my heart slamming against my ribs. I slipped out through the back hall, down the stairs, through the maintenance exit, and into the biting cold. Only when I reached my car did I allow myself to exhale. I gripped the steering wheel, my breath fogging the windshield. They were searching for the truth I already carried. And this time I wasn't running away. I was taking it home. I drove away from Heartstone Lodge with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, every nerve lit up with the weight of what was hidden inside my coat. "Olivia, if you're hearing this, then what I feared has happened." My breath hitched. "Harriet." Her voice was weaker than I remembered, but steady. Determined. "Your father pressured me to sign a simplified will. He wanted control. But the lodge, its history, its spirit was never his. It was passed down through the women of our family. And you live. You are the one who understands it." The recording paused as if she'd needed a breath. I hid Addendum C because I knew he would destroy it. She had been alone. But she never stopped loving me. A soft noise snapped me from my reverie. Footsteps. Close. I shut my laptop, slipped the documents into my coat, and stepped behind one of the tall bookshelves just as the library door clicked open. Voices drifted inside. "Check the attic again," my father's voice hissed. She must have taken something. Caroline's voice followed, shrill, panicked. "Dad, what if she found it? What if she actually..." "Quiet," he snapped. Harriet's voice still lingered in my ears, telling me to protect the children, to protect the house, to protect myself. My phone buzzed. "Alan." I've reviewed everything he said without preamble. "Olivia, Addendum C is ironclad. With the original document, the clerk stamped copy, and Harriet's audio recording, there is no legal argument your father can make. Heartstone Lodge is yours." My breath hitched. "And the rest? Probate, tampering, fraud, identity manipulation." He's vulnerable on every front. Vulnerable. The powerful Richard Hart. My father. The man who had taught me silence was safer than truth. "I need to file this," Alan said. "Today. Do it." When I hung up, my hands trembled, not with fear but with resolve. Within 3 hours, a formal notice was issued. That afternoon, my father and Caroline received emergency summonses to the courthouse. By evening, I stood outside the courthouse steps with the wind tugging at my coat, watching them climb out of their car. Caroline looked brittle, eyes swollen, makeup too heavy, her fiancé nowhere in sight. My father looked furious. Jaw tight, shoulders stiff, the confidence he wore like armor beginning to crack. He approached me with venom in his voice. "You think you've won. I didn't come here to win," I said. "I came to tell the truth." He glared. "You have no idea what you're walking into. I know exactly what you created." Before he could respond, a court officer opened the doors, calling us inside. The courtroom felt colder than the wind outside. The judge reviewed Addendum C, flipping through its pages with practiced efficiency. My father's lawyer stammered excuses, unfiled paperwork, clerical errors, misunderstandings. None of it made sense. None of it aligned with the sealed clerk copy Alan had found. Caroline stood beside my father, eyes fixed on the floor. My mother sat behind me, hands shaking in her lap, unable to look at either of them. After reviewing the audio recording, the judge lifted his gaze. Mr. Hart, this evidence shows deliberate tampering with probate documents. Addendum C is valid. Hartstone Lodge is hereby transferred to Miss Olivia Hart. The court will proceed with an investigation into the alleged tampering and asset redirection. My father's face drained of all color. Caroline clenched her fists. This isn't fair, she whispered hoarsely. It's just one document. No, I said softly, turning toward her. It's the truth. The judge stood, signaling the end of the hearing. My father's lawyer rushed to him, whispering frantically. Caroline hovered helplessly, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. When I stepped into the hallway, the air felt too thick to breathe. Caroline rushed after me. Please, she said, voice cracking. If you take the lodge, what do I have left? I paused, studying her. Her perfect facade was gone. Her eyes were raw, swollen. Her breath shook. You have everything you chose, I said quietly. Now you have to live with it. She shook her head, tears slipping down. Mom always loved you more. I blinked at her, stunned by the childlike sadness in her voice. Caroline? You never asked why. She turned away, shoulders trembling, and walked down the hall without another word. My father approached, next steps, heavy voice low. You will regret this. I met his eyes, the same eyes that had once made me feel small. Not anymore. You threatened to burn the lodge, I said calmly. 2 investigators overheard you. His mouth snapped shut. A flicker of fear crossed his face, real fear, not anger. For the first time I saw him clearly. Not powerful, not untouchable. Just a man who built his legacy on lies and control. I walked away before he could say another word. That evening I returned home exhausted but steady. Lucas and Emma ran to me again, but this time I felt light despite the heaviness of the day. You're smiling, Emma said. Yes, I whispered. I am. We curled up on the couch, the 3 of us beneath a blanket, as snow fell softly outside. Later, after they drifted to sleep, I sat by the window with Harriet's letter in my lap. The house was quiet, the warmth growing from the heater and from something deeper, something like peace. I thought of my father's terrified eyes, Caroline's empty desperation, my mother's quiet apology, Harriet's voice whispering through time. I had the power now to destroy them completely, financially, legally, publicly. But Harriet's letter weighed heavy in my hands. Protect the children. Protect the house. Warm the world that hurt you. I exhaled slowly. I won't destroy, I whispered. Not if I don't have to. I picked up my phone and called Alan. Keep the lodge in my name, I said. But don't take anything else. I want the truth protected, not revenge. He paused. That's incredibly generous. It's not generosity, I said softly. It's choosing grace over the ruin they chose. When the call ended, I looked around my little home. The drawings on the wall, the untouched gingerbread cookies, the quiet glow of Christmas lights, and then I imagined Hartstone Lodge lit by the same warmth, the same spirit, the same possibility. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the future shift towards something brighter. Tomorrow I thought I would take my children to the lodge. Tomorrow I would open its doors again. Tomorrow the house would remember. Not because it was mine, but because I was finally ready to claim it. The first morning after the hearing felt strangely calm, as if the storm that had been building for years had finally passed through and left the world washed clean. Soft sunlight filtered through the curtains, turning the frost on the window into tiny rivers of gold. Lucas and Emma padded into my room in their pajamas, whispering excitedly about opening the last of their Christmas presents. Their laughter filled every corner of the house, and for a moment I stood there just watching them, These two little souls who had been labeled not suitable yet carried more goodness and kindness in their small hands than the entire heart family had managed in generations. Mom, Lucas said, tugging my sleeve. "Can we go to the lodge today?" I smiled. "Yes," I whispered. "We can go home today." Their eyes lit up and something warm settled deep in my chest. This was what Harriet had wanted all along. Not power, not money, not control. Just home, just family, just warmth. After breakfast, we bundled up and drove through the snow-covered roads toward Heartstone Lodge. The closer we got, the more something inside me softened. The towering trees lining the driveway looked like old friends welcoming us back. The lodge stood quietly under a blanket of snow, grand and timeless, yet somehow changed, lighter, freer. "This is ours?" Emma asked in awe, as she stared out the window. "Yes," I said softly, pulling her close. "This is where your great-grandmother wanted you to grow and dream." Inside, the lodge was cool and silent. Our footsteps echoed on the polished floors. The kids ran from room to room, their voices bouncing off the old walls that had once felt like cages, but now felt like possibilities. We wandered into the library, the hearth still cold and dark. I knelt in front of it and touched the stones, gently remembering how Harriet used to sit here with me reading books and telling stories about how the lodge had a soul. Lucas crouched beside me. "Can we light it, Mom?" I nodded, and together we built a small fire. When the flames began to crackle, a soft glow filled the room, warming the air, warming the memories. I placed Harriet's photograph above the mantel and whispered, "Your house remembers now." The kids curled up next to me as the fire burned brighter. Lucas rested his head on my shoulder. Emma traced her finger along the edge of Harriet's frame. "Mom," Emma asked, "are we going to live here?" I looked around the room, the tall bookshelves, the wide windows, the soft snow outside, and felt the answer settle naturally. "Maybe not live," I said, brushing her hair back gently. "But this will be our place. A place we visit. A place we grow. A place we keep safe." Later that afternoon, my mother arrived at the lodge carrying a tray of Christmas cookies. She looked small and tired, but there was a light in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. "Can I come in?" she asked hesitantly. "Yes," I whispered. "You can." She hugged me tightly, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry, Olivia. For everything, I was too afraid to stop." I held her just as tightly. "You're trying now," I said. "That matters." We spent the next hour together, walking through the old rooms, sharing memories of Harriet, her laugh, her stubbornness, her quiet strength. At one point, my mother touched a decorative carving on the staircase rail and whispered, "She always knew this house needed you." I didn't respond, but the warmth in my chest was enough. News updates buzzed on my phone throughout the day. My father formally removed from the board, investigators expanding their search, Caroline avoiding the media altogether. None of it gave me joy. Not satisfaction. Not revenge. Just closure. As evening fell, Lucas and Emma played in the snow outside the lodge while my mother and I sat by the fireplace. Flames crackled softly. The air smelled faintly of pine and old wood. My mother turned to me, her voice barely above a whisper. "What will you do now?" I smiled at the fire. "Something good," I said. "Something honest." I told her my plan to turn the lodge into a place for community gatherings, winter concerts, children's art workshops, and holiday events where no child would ever be turned away because they were not suitable. A place filled with laughter, warmth, and truth. A place Harriet would be proud of. My mother's eyes filled with tears. "You're changing the heart legacy," she said softly. "You're giving it back its heart." I looked out the window at Lucas and Emma, snowflakes clinging to their hair as they built a crooked snowman together. "No," I whispered. "They're changing it." When night finally wrapped around the lodge, we gathered our things and headed home. The air was cold and crisp, but I felt warmer than I had in years. As I tucked the kids into bed, Emma sleepily whispered, "Mom, Grandma Harriet would be happy, right?" I brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "Yes, sweetheart. She's smiling somewhere tonight. Downstairs, I sat in the quiet glow of the Christmas tree, letting the entire journey settle into my heart. The betrayal, the lies, the unraveling the truth, the inheritance, the courage it took to finally reclaim what was mine. And then softly to the invisible audience listening across the world, I spoke the final truth I had learned. I used to think revenge meant striking back. But now I know. Sometimes the strongest revenge is reclaiming what was stolen and turning it into something warm enough to heal you. I let the words linger, then smiled gently. If you've ever been pushed aside by your own family or fought to protect your children's place in the world, tell me your story in the comments. I read every one. And if you've walked this journey with me to the end, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and stay on the channel for the next story. You never know whose truth we'll uncover next. I glanced once more at the quiet night beyond my window, the snow falling peacefully, the world finally in balance. This, I whispered, was the Christmas, the house. And my heart finally remembered who they belonged to.